Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective here with my guys, Colin Camphy and Ryan Klepser. We are here to break down the men's Texas basketball team heading into the 2023-2024 season. Now the first official season under Rodney Perry as the head coach. We know coming off of last year's team and effort and the craziness that went on, ended up being our most successful basketball campaign since 07-08 when we won 30 games. We finished 29-9 last year, had an Elite Eight appearance, one game short of the Final Four, which we would have loved to get to Houston, Texas. But really excited for this program and the direction that things have been under, considering all of the craziness of last season. So, guys, everybody here, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe the whole bit. We are back talking Texas hoops. Tell a friend. I know a lot of people last year said, hey, can we get more on basketball? Where's the basketball community? We are also going to have this out on audio, wherever you get your podcasts as well, because I also want to have this available for people that want to listen in as we try to transition to the Spotify world and Apple and all that. So if you're not watching here on YouTube and you want to digest this in the car or while you're working out, I appreciate it. Colin, Ryan, how you guys doing today?
We're good, man. Got to take in, last 2 weeks of an internal scrimmage at Gregory Gym, and then Ryan and I were over there this week to watch Texas play St. Ed's, which was an interesting experience, but we're looking forward to talking some hoops.
Awesome. Ryan, before we get to the St. Ed's, scrimmage and talking about this year's team, any parting thoughts, off of last year's 29-9 campaign, Big 12 tournament champions, the transition from Chris Beard to Rodney Perry, but also the guys that we lost, right? And the guys that fought for us last year. Just parting thoughts off of last season for you, man.
Yeah, I think everyone can agree that we got very attached to that team just from what they went through from a resiliency standpoint. Our top three scorers being gone, tough to see. Walking in that gym and not seeing SJR, honestly, was heartbreaking for me. One of my favorite basketball players I've watched at Texas, and he was only here for a year. So I think just departing thoughts is we had an amazing run, fell short at the Elite Eight. Final Four has been nothing short of remarkable based off the circumstances. But overall, I think it's a good jump-off point for Rodney Terry and the offseason that we had and who we were able to pick up, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But parting thoughts, it is going to be tough to not see Marcus, Timmy, Serge Ibaka, those guys who are contributing, Christian Bishop at a high level. A lot of opportunity for some guys to step in and play a big role this year.
I'll pass it to you, Colin. Parting thoughts from last year.
Yeah, I mean, a lot what Ben said. It was one of those runs where you feel connected, obviously emotionally, for folks who watch Texas sports and have a love for Texas basketball specifically, to see a team go as deep as it's been since really the early 2000s. And some Texas fans weren't born to see that run with that team. So it's fun to have a similar experience almost 20 years later. Roster that was constructed in the new age way of building a basketball roster, right? It used to be you either have 4-year guys or 5-year guys, a lot of experience that have been with the program for a long time, or you go the Kentucky way where you have a bunch of 5-star athletes that come in as freshmen and then are one and done to the NBA. This roster was such an interesting mix of using the transfer portal as well as having some guys who have grown up through the program as well, with Dylan DeSue being a transfer, but obviously being an awesome guy and then being in the program a few years as well. So really looking forward to seeing how this roster has been rebuilt and hopefully going on a fun ride this.
It's funny you mention the roster building aspect of how we got to that previous group and this group now, because I remember when we hired Chris Beard from Texas Tech, him talking about building that Texas Tech team through the portal, and him being one of, let's be honest, one of the early adopters in college basketball in terms of how to attack the portal and building out a team. and having a year to maybe 2 year mindset with collective groups. That's really how he thought. He never had a vision of 4 year hoops like my guy Roy Williams did for North Carolina and some of those old head coaches who the portal really hit them, and some of them have adjusted, right, and made wind of it. And you look at Izzo at Michigan State, what he's done and how he's adjusted. And some guys, just like Roy said, I can't, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not, trying to recruit my guys to stay with the program every single season. And I look at the transition with Rodney Terry. The beauty with it for us was Rodney was always a part of that game plan. When Chris put together the original staff, the original mindset, and the original attempt behind how we recruit and build the roster. I think that a lot of us obviously focused on the prep side of things because we had a guy like Ron Holland committed and we had the AJ Johnsons of the world committed, and those things didn't work out, obviously, with the craziness of the offseason. But even still landing some of the recruits he landed to close out from a prep standpoint and supplementing the portal. And now you're seeing in the 2020, as we record this, Nick Cody out of Dallas, Texas, just committed to Texas, top 35 player in the 2024 class, right? So, joining Cam Scott, who's another kid out of the East Coast that we're picking up, bringing over to this class. So we are seeing them pay attention to the prep side, but also really still supplement that strongly with the portal. Speaking of the portal guys, I'm going to hand it over to you guys, and I'll start with Ryan. You guys got to see this team actually hoop against St. Ed's in the gym. And, you can start with the portal guys and the newcomers, just what you guys saw. And I see y'all kind of laughing there because I heard it was a pretty wonky game.
Wonky would be interesting to say the least, but like RT says, don't get it twisted. He's part of this recruitment plan to begin with. But yeah, the Moody Center, which we went to the Arkansas scrimmage last year, which was a whole different feel. There was a football game on the same day. I think the scrimmage was at like noon. We're like, oh, this would be a big matchup with Arkansas. And it was actually pretty dead for the most part. And of course, we blew them out by 30 in that scrimmage. So going into this, we were expecting much of the same. We walk in, we sit down, we're like, all right, a lot of people here. We look around, sea of blue, or dark blue, navy blue, I call it, right? St. Ed's section. So we walk around, we sit down with the UT crowd, and we look across, and they had covered the Indeed Club top to bottom full. And it was, I know you had mentioned that there was some, I guess, excitement around campus and getting everyone there. And I'm pretty sure everyone that's part of that student body was there. So that was an interesting dynamic. Game started very slow, of course, picked it up at half. Just the whole experience from start to finish was pretty taken aback. And I wasn't very happy at halftime, as you probably saw with my text messages. I was like, here we go. This is the first year. And everything sort of, evened itself out. I think they, like you said, they thought they were doing some runs at Lifetime or something. But overall, we were able to settle in and take care of business. But a very funny start to that. And like where are we at with this? What's going on right now where they're beating us by 7?
Real quick, Ryan, just to interject, just for those who were unfamiliar with St. Edward's. St. Edward's is a Division II school, South Austin, which is, they don't have a football program. Okay. So they really kind of hone in on basketball, soccer, and then, some of the other, outdoor sports, whether it's baseball or things, or softball, things of that sort. So in a very, very small school. Reason why I know this is my wife is a St. Edward's alum, and she was telling me that, they have a very, very small community. They're just on top of the hill. They're called the Hilltoppers. And in that very small community, they were like, hey, there's this basketball scrimmage, and why not look for an opportunity to come and make some noise, with Big Brother, in Austin and everything, right? And, of course, Rodney Terry also being a St. Edward's alum. So, good little local thing. And I think you guys told me there was a bunch of Austin boys, local guys on that St. Edward's team. So you can already imagine that one opportunity they get, that one crack they get, while, the Texas guys are wiping crust out their eyes, just waking up thinking they're getting some cardio in. So I think that's pretty funny as well.
Yeah, I think just reaction-wise, you take a look at the first half, we start Max Admis, who's a transfer from Oral Roberts, going to be a senior. When we think about kind of rebuilding the roster, and we start Brock Cunningham, who's obviously coming back. We start Ithel Horton, who's the transfer senior again from Central Florida. We start Tyrese Hunter, who's a returner. We start Dylan Mitchell, who came from actually his name in the NBA draft for a portion of time. And so, if you take a look at that group of players, it's really small because we're missing Dylan DeSue, who's hurt, and then Caden Shedrick, who's a transfer from Virginia, is also hurt. And so, that five, there was, or kind of, just starting to gel together, or size-wise, just didn't play very well in the first half. So we're down 7 at halftime, 39-32. We wound up kind of in the second half coming back into, playing what the basketball that we could be playing when the game started, and won by, 21 points. But I think I was most impressed by Zarek Oyema. So he's a, 6'8", 235 transfer from UTEP, who's going to be a junior this year. Really provided kind of that we need a relatively small and, to be standard kind of St. Edward's team. And he really kind of dominated the glass and dominated in the paint in the second half. And I think provided a lot of spark to then be able to kick the ball out for Admis and Tyrese to have big games from the outside as well. Slow start, but, team picked it up in the second half. And I thought they actually looked really good for that second session of basketball.
To that point, I think, when under Chris Beard, our identity was, kind of the no middle defense, really starting defensive minded, very ball dominant with our guards, a lot of ISO, and kind of evolve from there. And we would roll from there. Then at the end of last season, our front court just blossomed, right? And we started running so much from them, whether it was Timmy or Dylan DeSue, and they were dominant. And then we were kind of an inside-out team. How are we going to play basketball this year, just from what y'all have seen? And I know the injuries, that's a concern I have up front, just being transparent with the both of you. I don't like the fact that Dylan DeSue is still banged up. I don't like the fact that Cedric's in here and we're already hurting at those positions. It makes me wonder how reliable are they going to be for the long haul? And that's a concern I have. But overall, when you see this whole thing kind of put together, how do you think they're going to look under Rodney Terry in terms of style? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, I think it's going to be less ball dominant. That's one thing, even though we were missing our bigs. Max and Tyrese both weren't holding on to the ball for a long period, which was refreshing. I think there was a little bit of discontinuity with Dylan playing center, and I don't think that's where we want him, because the way he was trying to play, it didn't really fit that mold, which then pulled him out of the paint on the defensive side of the ball too. But I think we will play through our bigs and use a lot of pick and roll with Max and Tyrese. And, I was texting you that Max was having a great game, but then I look up and Tyrese had 18 points like it was nothing. And it was not off of like him dominating the ball. It was a lot of catch and shoot threes. Max took a couple logo shots, which is expected and is going to make Moody Center fun. And as we know, everyone shoots the ball really well in the Moody Center. So I think that's going to be an exciting dynamic. Is our backcourt, I think, is more rounded because we had talent last year. But I think it's going to be a little bit of even distribution across the board. Having Shedrick and DeSue being able to rotate, we may have some scenarios where both of them will play at the same time. They're sort of the same player, so I'm not sure. That'd be a lineup. But I think RT has a little bit more at his disposal, similar to how he did last year with rotating Bishop and DeSue. Mitchell was in that fold last year, but I think he's going to be more in the wing / forward category. So I think it's going to be a more balanced attack. The defense, I'll let Colin chime in on this, but the defense still looked very engaged, very active. Bups in the, but overall in the second half, we cleaned it up and ran the floor pretty well, I thought. So I think the word that I would use is going to be balance with what we see from a standpoint.
Yeah, I think all of those are good points. I think if you take a look at the team, this should look very different at the start of the year than at the end of the year. And really that comes down to Dylan DeSue being hurt right now and Caden Shedrick who was hurt for the two previous and actually cleared to go down baseline to baseline today. So I'm not sure what his minutes may look like, if any, for the opener on Monday. But those guys will add a different element that we don't have and didn't have kind of for the scrimmage this week. I think we really will need to play through kind of cards that we have. Obviously the senior in Max Abmas, who's played significant minutes in the NCAA tournament. Ithiel Horton, who played significant minutes for Central Florida, and then you lean on guys like Dylan Mitchell and Tyrese Hunter, and then obviously coming back also. Probably earlier on the season, it actually helps to have an easier non-conference schedule this year relative to what we had last year. So we can allow, Shedrick to come back, get his minutes restriction off, get kind of, the chemistry going with the team. And then, it should be maybe around a month or two for Dylan to come back. Foot injuries generally are very tough for basketball players to come back, do all the cutting, jumping that we all know. So I think this team will continue to kind of be dynamic and kind of shift in between our eyes as the kind of season goes on. And we'll frankly need, a healthy Dessou and a healthy Shedrick when we get into Big 12 season, because, we added a few teams this year, including, Central Florida, BYU, and a Houston team who has been constantly ranked in the top 10 for the last few basketball seasons. It's a very, very good team. So, this Big 12 conference has not gotten any easier over the last, 12 months or so.
I'm glad you brought up the additions in the conference, because I think it's really interesting to see, monitoring how these teams also acclimate and develop. There's been a lot of transition and movement within the conference, some familiar faces in different jerseys that'll be on your favorite Big 12 team and pop up, and you'll be like, what the hell? I didn't know so-and-so was hooping at so-and-so now, right? Just wait, you'll see it. I do think, though, going back to, one of the guys that Ryan mentioned in his farewell, Sir-Jabari Rice, somebody that was able to give us a component that I hadn't really seen at Texas in a minute, maybe since Jacobin Brown type days, where you could just come off the bench and just change the dynamic of a basketball game. A professional scorer in that sense. I'm happy he's on my San Antonio Spurs now. Does that punch come from? Is there anyone on the bench that you guys are seeing, I'm not going to ask if there's another Sir-Jabari Rice. That's not a fair question. But where, any of these other guys that have come in, if we can get any juice out of them, that fans should be excited about. I'll go with you first, Ryan.
Yeah, I would say Horton's going to can emulate some of those things off the bench. I'm not sure he'll start. I don't think he will. He did because of the situation we're in right now. But between him and Weaver, and Pryor got some burn too, which, was very short-lived. By the way, looks like he could be the part in terms of RT and can develop him. I think he's a long-term project. Chris Johnson played, but then he rolled his ankle, so I don't know the status of that. But he looked pretty good getting up and down the floor. Larger guards, which is something we haven't had. But if you're talking about strictly who can try to step in those very big shoes that Sir-Jabari had, I think Horton, simply because he can shoot it really well, guarded the ball, very aggressive top, which, something that SJR hung his hat up on the defensive side too. And then maybe not from a scoring standpoint with what Sir-Jabari did, but Colin hit the nail on the head. Oniyama ran the floor, plays extremely hard. And he's not a small guy. I mean, he's all of 6'9", 245, 250 built, which is a little bit different than our bigs that we had last year. Christian and Dylan were more the slender ones. He's a bruiser. So I think that's going to play a factor in terms of some of the energy you can bring when you have Dylan and Cedric, who may be getting in foul trouble or a little bit of a breather.
With Onyema.
Yeah, I think if you're.
Oh, go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, I think if you're familiar with the team last year, you look at someone like Max kind of sliding into a Marcus Carr role, and you look at, Horton kind of sliding into maybe what could be that Sir-Jabari Rice role. Onyema being that, I think that's a good comparison to Christian Bishop, but maybe a more physical Christian Bishop. And then we're adding a true rim protector in Caden Shedrick. I mean, we haven't had somebody who's truly 6'11" on this basketball team for a few years since, you had kind of the Mo Bambas and the Miles Turners kind of roll through as those true 7-footers who went to the NBA. We're going to have a true rim protector who did something very similar at Virginia, but also because Virginia has played so slow over the last few years, he kind of said this in an interview today on Texas. He's excited to be in those pick and rolls and provide something on the offensive side of the floor for us this year as well. So I think there's a lot of exciting new pieces that are kind of coming into the fold.
The interesting thing will be if it can emulate what Max did a few years ago when he was at Oral Roberts. If someone can be that O'Banner player, Dylan can shoot it. I mean, he did. A lot of people wouldn't advise him to shoot it, but I think he's a fairly good shooter. And so you can look at the pick and roll and the pick and pop with him. Can we emulate that? Because that was pretty magical what Max was doing with O'Banner at Oral for that 1 year. It'll be interesting to see, but Colin's spot on, I think, in terms of how those can slide into these pieces and keep it rolling.
I think with Dylan Dessou, it's interesting because with what he showed in the tournament and at the end of last season, he showed like he was an All-American type talent. Let's just be honest with that type of production out of the front court, the decision-making, the fact that we were literally just repeatedly feeding him the basketball and allowing him to cook in almost an NBA style was really, really interesting to watch. With his health, though, I don't know how, and I think that's a big question for Rodney Terry this season of how him and this coaching staff manages that. But we need to talk about the other Dylan, because I'm hearing that Dylan Mitchell is here with a bag now. I'm hearing that Dylan Mitchell is here to participate on offense this season, and not just catching lobs, but actually, getting to the cup and shooting confidently. I'm hearing confidence from a lot of different people saying, hey, the NBA combine workouts that you saw, Steve, were not a fluke. He's really stepping into his moment. I feel like this is a very, very important development for several different reasons. Convincing a player of his caliber of where he was recruited to come back to the program for development, I think that's a sell potentially long-term. I think what he can give you with his talent and athleticism, a lot of people don't have a player like that at the wing in the country. And if he's able to shoot the basketball with any type of capacity and be able to competently put the ball on the floor and get to the rim, now I have another offensive weapon. Am I going too far even saying offensive weapon with Dylan Mitchell, or what are you guys seeing? I don't know who wants to take this one first, but I've heard a lot of stuff about Dylan Mitchell, and I got questions.
Yeah, I can go. So he was basically the focal point of the offense during the kind of the inter-squad scrimmage at Gregory a few weeks ago, and it was really surprising. I went and sat down. That I was a lot of Max shots and a lot of Tyrese Hunter, driving the basket and shots as well. I wasn't expecting Dylan Mitchell to be, posting up and taking, 12, 15-foot follow-away jump shots. And I certainly wasn't expecting them to go into the basket if he was doing that. So I think it was really impressive to see him, what he's worked on over the summer, obviously, to get ready for that kind of NBA draft grade. And then once he kind of realized where he would fall in that draft, coming back to school and really utilizing what he's picked up over the last, 6 or 8 months since the end of the tournament to hopefully become a weapon for this basketball team. And I do think, especially early on without Dylan Dessou, you're going to see a lot of him, a lot more volume in terms of him taking shots on the offensive side of the ball for that front court. Whether it's an actual weapon, this season, I kind of a wait and see. Can he consistently hit those 12 to 15-foot jump shots? Is he going to be taking threes this year? Does he, develop maybe something with a back to the basket post game? I don't know. I think that's definitely something to monitor as we kind of work through the early season, though.
Ryan, don't you think that because Colin just said if Dylan Dessou is out, volume wise, Mitchell's going to get work, right, offensively. And I remember, coming to you on this because I remember you saying last season you didn't fully blame Dylan Mitchell because it's hard to do the things the coaches are asking to do when you never ever get your number called and then running no plays for you. And I remember you saying that as a basketball player, it's like, all right, man, kind of ho hum. Is that some of what you're seeing here in develop? And is it could it be a blessing in disguise that Dylan Dessou is out where we can get Dylan Mitchell ramped up with the extra activity?
You read my brain because that's where I was going, because I did say that. So what you said from last year, and it's true. I think the thing that I noticed, I can't speak for the inter-squad scrimmage because I didn't go, but at this scrimmage against, or the exhibition against St. Ed's, they were actively getting him in the post. They were running that overload horn set that we did a lot last year that generally was Dessou at the bottom and we have someone at the pinch at the top. We're throwing it into Dylan at the bottom, and then we're letting him have the ball in the short corner, and that's making those turnaround fadeaways. I think that's exactly what it is. Coaches are getting involved. One thing to call out that we haven't talked about, we have a few new coaches on the staff. Maybe there's some different motivations and ways we want to approach getting people the ball. Frank Haith is a very good basketball mind who's been around the game for a while, and that's not talked about as much, but I think he could have some input in this. But overall, it's getting him involved via running plays for him, not saying, hey, Dylan, go stand in the corner, and once every blue moon, Tyrese will throw you a lob from the backs, go get it. I think so. Then it turns into a confidence thing for any basketball player who can be called upon to be like, hey, we're going to get you the ball in these few possessions, go to work. They'll go do it. Generally, college basketball players are pretty good with that. So that's what I'm excited to see, is how we continue to get him those reps as Dylan recovers.
Another guy we need to touch on before we progress here in our preview. And this is before we get into expectations, because that'll kind of be our next round here. The elder statesman in the room, Captain Scrap himself, Brock Cunningham, back for his 18th season at the University of Texas. I honestly don't even know how many years the guy's been here at Texas, because I remember him starting to come off the bench after like a redshirt year. It was when COVID hit, when we still had Will Baker. And Brock started getting run at the end of the season. And then we kind of went on a little streak before Oklahoma State blew us out, which I remember was like the very last game before we were going to go to the Big 12 tournament. And then COVID hit. That's how long Brock Cunningham has been hooping. He's been through multiple regimes. And yet I will say that this is just from me to Brock. He's no longer just a guy that you put out there for energy, or the goon guy or whatever. I'll give Brock credit. Brock has improved his basketball skills over the years, where he's not, because there were times where he would be out there and it's like, well, he's a liability for from a basketball standpoint. And the way he's improved his shooting, his reads, basketball IQ, being in the proper screening, all the dirty work things, but also having good active hands around the rim and finishing, having a little floater, being able to put the ball on the floor and do something, whether it's make a decision to pass or to get all the way to the cup and get to the free throw line. I've really been impressed with his development. I think that speaks to how this entire Texas basketball program was able to stick together. Anybody want to talk about Captain Scrap back for Brock Cunningham? I'll pass it to Ryan first.
Big fan. That's all I gotta say. It's good to see him back out there. I mean, he was taking much more shots while he was in. I know he started for us, so he did get a couple pick and pop threes. I mean, wide open. And I think I did call it last year at the beginning of the year. I said Brock was to 53, and I think he finished. I don't know if we can get the official stat, but it was pretty close. Just because he's going to get open looks. So having him back is important. I think it's more of a culture thing too. He knows the expectations that RT has. Having someone to help a lot, the newcomers, the young guys, is a good person to have leading the ship. It's just that important. And you always take guys like that on your team who are going to be able to contribute every night in some shape, form, or fashion. And it's good to have him back, and because it will make it.
Colin, are you going to shed a tear on senior night when Brock finally walks?
Uh, I mean, I don't know. Look, you go back 2 years, and Brock was the guy where you go, and you're like, it's like, I can't believe this is happening right now. And then, he takes a shot, and you're like, oh God, I really can't believe this is happening now. And to his credit, basically took everything that he's done with that 17 years of college basketball that Steve touched on, and he was a 41% three-point shooter. He had a lot of really big shots for the team. Whether it's because that scheme-wise, teams are trying to take away other players, whether it's just because he has a very high basketball IQ. He does a very good job of trying to be in the right place at the right time, really under, obviously, the culture, obviously the offensive and kind of defensive, strategies and kind of game plans that, the coaches are going to put in place. And so he's earned the minutes that he gets, obviously last year and then going into this year as well. So no tears from me, but a few claps way out during senior night this year.
So as we get to senior night and we start to look at this schedule and this roster, I'll start with Colin here. Expectations, right? I mean, Rodney Terry was 22-8 as interim head coach, won a Big 12 title from the conference championship standpoint and finished with the Elite Eight after everything that happened under Chris Beard. So now we look at, this is now his program. Chris Del Conte's handed him the keys. Everything you've seen from a recruiting standpoint, roster development standpoint, Ryan touched on the new coaches. Where's your head at expectation-wise of what what would make you happy, and what do you think how the season kind of plays out under RT in year two?
Yeah, I think when you take a at last 29-9 team, ranked 5th in Ken Palm, top 15 in both offensive and defensive efficiencies. So, it's really hard to take a look at last year and then really provide, true expectations going into you kind of the roster using the portal. But that's the strategy for, it was last year with Chris Beard, and it was when, Rodney Terry was on Chris Beard's staff, and it is with Rodney Terry as the head coach. And so when you take a look at this year, really ranked inside the top 30 for both offensive and defensive efficiency this year. I think it'll be really interesting to look at the tempo. You saw that increase last year relative to the year before. Does that continue to increase, especially early in the season without Dylan DeSue and possibly Shedrick for a period of time where we're playing a little bit more small ball? But I do think we're going to get to kind of ease into this season. Last year, conference season's really easy. You've got a neutral game with LSU. You go up to New York and you get to play Louisville, who is a terrible basketball team. They lost to a Division III opponent in their exhibition. And then if you win that, you probably get to play Connecticut. And that may be your one real test besides go 2 months and have to play, the old coach up there. So, but really, once kind of December and January rolls around for Big 12 play is really where I think we're going to see where this team is. I think this team can be, a top 50 in the nation. If they have as much talent as last year, I don't. But that doesn't mean, they can come together. They can play with good chemistry. They have, experience on the roster to make a run at probably, a top 3 or 4 finish maybe in the Big 12. I'm expecting a 1 like last year and hopefully, get one of those 4 or 5 seeds and make a run in the NCAA tournament as well. So those are kind of where I'm setting the goalposts prior to the season starting. Obviously, that kind of moves around as we gain a little bit more information on the team, get a little bit more, insight how they played and see those early season games. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to as the season starts on Monday.
Ryan, your thoughts?
RT set a very high bar for himself at the point, right? 1 loss at home last year, which was against Kansas State in that crazy NBA game that it turned out to be. It was like 117, 110, something like that. Outside of that, we went undefeated at home, which we sort of overlooked. Like we almost expected with that team that we were going to come in and win every game, which is not how that's been for us as a basketball program, the last 10 years. So that's just a step up that Rodney's going to have to take on and say, we need to finish in that same spot heading into the Big 12. I think we had 1 loss, right? I believe going into Big 12 play. Could be sitting in that same spot. This time I'd love to get a shot at UConn just as a good litmus test, hopefully strength with the back. But all these other games that are on here should be relatively straightforward and tune-ups for what's going to be a very tough Big 12 again. From what we can tell, every team's going to have guys that can go, so it's just going to be like last year. Who's going to show up? But I think the key for us, scheduling, is can we take care of business at home? If you can win at home, not only in non-conference and in the Big 12, you're going to be sitting pretty good and finish where Colin mentioned in that top, 3 to 4 in the Big 12 and looking at a 4 to 5 seed in the tournament. So that's going to be the key for me is how do we play at home? Can we keep that magic going? Moody Magic, Club Moody, whatever you want. Hope they turn up the music louder this year for those who are not interested in that. It's a fun environment. Students showed up for even the scrimmage, so that was encouraging. Had a good amount there. So just continuing that type of experience at home is going to be pivotal in this team's success.
I'm glad you highlighted the home success that we had last year because I think that was a very underrated element. We were all excited about the campaign of the new Moody Center and the environment and the improvements that were made from an architecture standpoint to give us those edges there that we saw in other gyms when you look at major college basketball. And for it to pay off like that in year one, I think that needs to be meant, that's applause across the athletic department for how they performed at home. That's why they made that investment. So looking to maintain that and establish something, that's been a thing. Like people, I feel like over the years, people have loved coming to Austin and getting comfortable at the Drum, and y'all know that better than I do. And to see there be that home court advantage element for this basketball team, I think that, obviously will help you in non-con, but definitely in Big 12 play where everybody's looking to protect their gym. And we saw that big time last year and that making a difference of where we landed versus where several other talented Big 12 schools landed. I fall in a similar boat with you guys around that top 4 area in the Big 12. I mean, obviously Baylor's reloaded, Houston, and Kansas is probably your number 1 team right now in the country. And we'll see what Kansas State does and some of these other schools that may also reload and some other guys out there where what happens with Huggy Bear at West Virginia, considering the circumstances that have happened in West Virginia and the implosion there. But in all seriousness, I'm excited to see the brand of basketball under Rodney Terry, because aesthetically pleasing does mean something, especially from a recruiting standpoint. And, Colin mentioned earlier about Cedric, Tony Elliott's a great coach. Tony Bennett's a great coach over there at Virginia, national champion, right? But at the end of the day, if it's, not appeasing, it's not fun, right? This is not what I signed up for, then it could become problematic. So to see hearing guys wanting to play in this style of system that we're running, I want to make sure that that's appeasing to the fans as we're enjoying that product on the floor. Very curious to see how this stuff breaks out though with the injuries. That's my big concern right now for me. Any other concerns that you guys have or parting notes that you have coming into the season as we begin non-con?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's the injuries. How tested is the team going to be kind of going into Big 12 play with a weaker non-conference schedule? And then when you get into conference, you've got, the top 10 KenPom teams, and you've got 10 of the top, or 10 teams in the league in the top 50 for KenPom, with the other, 4 or so that are right outside of it. So, it's going to be a very difficult basketball season. And, hopefully when we get to conference, we're tested enough and we have everyone healthy, because that'll make it a little bit easier to hopefully control them. And then, when you go on the road in conference, if you can steal a game, it's always a win. Doesn't matter who you're playing on the road. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the depth and the rotations of how we work through that. We had two guys that played over 1,000 minutes last year, and one of those gets cramps every single game. So that's one thing to look at, making sure that he's healthy, because Tyrese is gonna be a massive part of what we do this year. So how does RT use the rotations? Is there gonna be a spot similar to where you're gonna have Tyrese goes out and Max is running with the twos? Because that's one thing I think fans can get excited about, is having a player like him score, just a pure score. Similar to Marcus, but Marcus did it in different ways. I think Max is going to be more catch and shoot, shot, trying to create it. So that will be fun to see. But I would say that's my biggest concern, is the rotations and who's going to step in and make sure we have the depth that we did last year. And there's a lot of opportunity with some of these guys that can step in and help this out. So that would be my biggest concern right now, is how we handle the side of things.
I'm glad you pointed out the difference with Marcus too. Marcus was, and I say this all the time, he was a guy who could get hot and get creative in his bag. And I think that was really helpful for us down clutch, right? Hey, everybody knows what sets you're running at this point. The game's mucky. Who can get a good shot on their own? Who can create their own shot? You'll hear that a lot in basketball for those of you watching out there. And Marcus Carr definitely had that ability and was very, very, probably underrated at the school when you think about all the clutch shots he hit and ability just to get us a good look when the shot clock's winding down. Balls have been reversed 2 or 3 times. Nobody knows what to do with it. He could get into something. I think, Max is going to be more of a guy who likes to get to spots. He's going to want to come off of curls. But he's looking at spots on the floor. If I get to my spot, I'm X amount percentage from here, bang, right? And so that's the type of score I see when I evaluate him. But it's a style, to Ryan's point, that can be very electric for fans when people get hot and the defense is not able to get him away from his spots on the floor. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I think the last thing I wanted to wrap on here is the fact that I am confident, though, when we get down into March, I do feel this way. I feel as though with the guard play I do have coming back, even though they haven't played together, the experience I have in my front court and talent, I do feel as though with this staff, they'll be able to play a lot of different styles, which should help them get to that second weekend in the tournament, and where we kind of breathe that sigh of relief and we're like, okay, we're one of the better teams in the country. I have that expectation. I would be very let down if they were to flop in March, knowing what this is, what we all kind of shoot for and the way the sport is angled. Even with the injury concerns, even with the backup point guard concerns, all those things, I do expect this team, with how they'll be tested in conference, to at least be a second weekend team in March. That is an expectation that I personally see for this group, where they are. What do we rank coming into the season? Where we rank, like 17th in the country, or 18th in the country right now? So we're like right outside that Sweet 16 range, right? But I think that they can get there. Personally, that's the expectation I have. I don't know if anybody agrees or disagrees with me on that before we sign off. I'll give it to you, Ryan.
Yeah, I would agree with you that, and we said this last year, you have to be able to win in a variety of ways. If Dessou and Shedrick are healthy, we can work that way through the post to win if it presents itself. And I also think our guard play, while Tyrese and Max are both on the smaller side from a guard standpoint, they're incredibly hard to guard. Both are scorers. I think being able to win both of those ways, and I'd love to see what happens with like our wing player who stands out with that group. Is it going to be Weaver? Is Chris Johnson going to be able to play Horton? Who's going to come up and be that wing player that we had last year that's going to impact and drive that? And I think RT played everyone. I mean, Devin too, prior run. So I think a chance for any one of those guys to slide in and be that person that we're going to need outside of the big five, if you will, who will be starting down the road.
Colin, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, it's funny because I think we only mentioned winning the Big 12 tournament one time, but what people really remember is what you do in March, right? So we can kind of go throughout the regular season. If you get a 15 seed and you go to the Elite Eight, it kind of throws out the rest of the season. So we'll kind of, take the time, do the analysis on the year, take each game, but when it gets to March, really dive in and see what we can do matchup wise, and then hopefully, get to that second determine. It's a coin flip the rest of the way there. So it's just exciting to have college basketball back and to be able to talk about it.
I agree. And our friend Austin Taylor couldn't be here with us today. He is still celebrating the Texas Rangers World Series championship, as am I here, and being a good future dad and taking care of his wife. So Austin, you are missed, but we will have him back when we preview the rest of the Big 12. And just, intermittently throughout the season, if there's a big matchup, we'll come on and talk about certain things. But I want to, kind of set the expectation here that this is kind of just where we're looking at this basketball team. Present day under Rodney Terry, year 2, really, really excited. Colin, Ryan, thank you guys for coming on. I really appreciate you, and talking ball as always. I can't believe it's already back, but guys, really, really appreciate having you on today.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Of course, man. Looking forward to the season and hook 'em.
Guys, remember, horns always up. Hook 'em.
Welcome.